Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of Cliff's Notes on Amateur Radio. In this episode, I'm going to share with you a bit of a funny picture of what I looked like when I was operating a recent Parks on the Air activation and ran into a significant technical challenge in the middle of one of my first pileups in the longest time. I'll also share with you some of my theory on why it's been so long since I've worked a pileup. I will also share with you in this episode, since I had a technical challenge and a piece of equipment failure, I'll share with you what piece of equipment failed, what I did to replace that piece of equipment, and how it inspired the purchase of some additional equipment. And then I will also share with you some other minor updates about some other gear that has had issues. And then also I will share with you a few new purchases I made to finally complete a portable backpack go bag that will allow me to, in one backpack, carry everything I need to go and do an activation out in the middle of the wilderness, whether that's Parks on the Air or if I ever even do summits on the air. Anyway, I'll share all of that, and who knows what else might also get included in here. Lots of comments along the way. But before I begin sharing all of those things, I want to say that this episode is inspired by my QSO with W2ELS. That would be Ron Rowe, Whiskey 2 Echo Lima Sierra. And he and I had a QSO during the middle of a pileup during one of my recent activations. And he heard my message in episode 14, the episode right before this. I said, hey, if you are somebody that catches me out there in the middle of an operation and you mention this podcast and or that you love the podcast or that you're eager for the next episode of the podcast, that will be enough to motivate me to make sure that within the next several days, I record another episode of the show. It's a reminder. It's like, oh yeah, I do have that podcast. And yeah, people out there do enjoy this show. They are enjoying my notes on amateur radio. And the two things that I'll say, or actually one thing that I'll say, one of two things. Either during the QSO, please request that I do an episode based upon our QSO right there on the spot. And I will do my best to, in my logging software, put a little note and things in there that will recall. But if you were to actually email me, then you could actually follow it up and I will read your email in the next podcast episode. Hopefully it won't be too long, but you get the gist. And Ron did just that. So let me read to you Ron's email. He says, hey, Cliff, it was great to connect with you on the air yesterday. I had to be the one to mention your podcast. So he's obviously referring to episode 14, where I said, if you mention the podcast, it will inspire me to do another episode within the next couple of days. So he said, we've both been hams for about the same amount of time. We've both dived deep into the hobby headfirst. He says that he earned his tech in July of 2024, his general in September 2024, and he went all the way into extra in November 2024. He says that he has a doctorate, but the toughest test I've ever studied for, he says, was the amateur extra exam. I've definitely heard that from a lot of people. Anyway, he says, I started my journey with CW about 9 months ago. It's truly humbling, but I really enjoy the challenge and the thrill of being on the air, sending dots and dashes. I'm a big fan of your, and this is how I know he listened to the most recent episode. He put in quotes, ham podcast. And it actually inspired me to start my own. It's called the 599 Signal Report Podcast, and it's all about CW and Morse code. My goal isn't to make money, but rather to provide helpful information to those who use CW and to inspire others to give it a try. Hope we can connect again, maybe park to park next time. 7-3, Ron, Whiskey 2, Echo Lima Sierra. All right, so if you want to go check out Ron's podcast, just in your favorite podcast directory of choice, search for 599 Signal Report podcast. All right. Thank you, Ron, for that. And of course, if you haven't done so already, you can go over to hamalert.org and set up a trigger so that anytime I am spotted on Parks on the Air, you can get notified. And that's how you can hunt me down in a park and request a new episode over at hamalert.org. All right, moving on to my next topic here. I finally took over first place in the number of QSOs for my local park here, Decker Wildlife Management Area. And what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to share with you some of my recent activations. I was about 400 QSOs away, or somewhere close to 400 QSOs away from first place. And I was about almost 280, near 300 QSOs away from second place. So I was seated in third place for number of QSOs. Now I've had first place for number of activations for Decker Wildlife Management Area for quite some time. So let's go over here to my activations. I will click on Decker Wildlife. Yeah, so the number 2 position for park leaders for Decker Wildlife for a number of activations is 24. And as of today, Monday, September 8th, 2025, I am now at 50 activations. So I'm more than double the second position. So that I feel pretty confident I've got that. And if I would see somebody coming after me, if we were looking at this as a real challenge, right? And this is just for fun. I get it. Here's the thing to know about me. I am 52 years old, and throughout most of my life, I have had zero interest in sports. I've had zero interest in anything when it comes to competing with others. Now, Decker Wildlife Management Area happens to be a local park that is one of the closest parks in proximity to where I live, and also several other members of the Northern Kentucky Amateur Radio Club. And so we all kind of love to go to this park because it's so close. I don't know if any of these other gentlemen actually care about leaderboards. I didn't until all of a sudden I'm like, I think I could. But I found myself just really like, I wanted to get into the number 1 activator spot because that was the first thing that I thought I could do. And of course, last year, with as much as I was obsessed with everything amateur radio, it didn't take me very long to get that first place on the leaderboard. The fact that they call it park leaders and they give you the top 5 positions, that to me indicates that there's a little bit of competition that is kind of inspired or motivated or encouraged, if you will. So if we look at the leaderboard for QSOs, there are 3 different leaderboards for park leaders. There's the number of activations from the park. I've got more than double second position. There's activator QSO. So when you're in the park, how many total QSOs, how many contacts have you made in that particular park? There is a third leaderboard, and it's for people who hunt people into that park or that are activating in that park. And my friend Jack AB4WS has 257. He's actually got 257 QSOs where, as a hunter for somebody that's activated that park. My friend Tom, NV4H, 93, and then KG8Y, Tom, 65. And so these folks, all 3 members of the local amateur radio club, and they set up their ham alerts to trigger anytime somebody activates the park. So that's something you can do with hamalert.org as well. You can go in and give it a park number and say, anytime somebody is activating from this park, send me a push notification. They may have other sorts of notifications like email or whatever as well. I'm not sure, but I have the Ham Alert app on my phone, and I get push notifications when some trigger is met. Anyway, so that's how somebody could find out that somebody's hunting or somebody's activating a park. And if you wanted to work your way up on that, you every time you get a notification somebody's activating that park, you'd want to go and try to make contact on as many of the bands that they're operating on. And that's what Jack and Tom certainly have done. I don't know if they're doing it for any sort of competition. In fact, I'm about 99.9% certain that it has nothing to do with competition for that leaderboard, and it has everything. I'm about 99.9% certain that they're hunting people down in that park specifically is that, and also they also will set triggers not just for the park, but they'll also set triggers for individual people. So I know that both Tom and Jack have Ham Alert set up for my call sign, because no matter what park I'm activating anywhere, both Jack and Tom seem to almost always hunt me down in a park. And I think the what I was about ready to say is 99% sure that they do that to be of encouragement and motivation in the hobby. They're like, listen, we're going to show our support. You're out there operating, and I think there's just something about, hey, Cliff, we haven't chatted in a while, haven't seen here, but you know what? I got the alert that you're here, and I tuned the antenna to this band and pointed it your way, and here we are on the air. And I just want to say thanks for activating. It's good to see you out there. And it's just those words of encouragement. It's just, it does. For some, it does inspire more activity, more commitment to the hobby. And that's one of my favorite things, is just how much people are into this for the pure enjoyment of the hobby, and to encourage one another, to motivate one another, to inspire one another. It's one of the reasons why I created this podcast, is to introduce other people to amateur radio and the various aspects and the things that I'm enjoying about it. I want to inspire other people to either get licensed and or go back and get relicensed again if you let it lapse, or if you've been licensed but you haven't been operating in a while, to by all means get out there and get active again. There's so much fun that could be had. And also, in the day, if anything happens, there's an opportunity for emergency communications, and being able to know that your radio equipment is able to be used in an emergency situation. Parks on the Air is just such a valuable resource, I think. But there is this element of these park leaderboards. And so I was in third place with like 2,600 QSOs. And second place at the time had 2,832 QSOs, and first place had 3,099. Now, I was, again, right around 2,600 QSOs, and I'm like, man, I'm fairly close to taking first place, but I would need another 400 some odd QSOs. And before those numbers, I was slowly edging up there, and I noticed that the two people above me were heading out to Decker Wildlife Management Area more frequently. It's clear that they saw, well, okay, it's not clear. I'm totally making assumptions here. But my assumption was that these guys see that, their position, their ranking on the board is in jeopardy. So AI4BJ, that would be Alpha India 4 Bravo Juliet, that's Mark Volstad. He's the person who helped me do my very first ever Parks on the Air activation once I was licensed. And so he had that number one position. Notice the past tense version of that, had the number one position. I think you get an idea of what's going on here. Anyway, he had the number one position, and then KC1E and KC1NE, Kilo Charlie 1 Nancy Edward, Craig had the number two position, and I think both of them saw me coming up the leaderboard for the park leader for Decker Wildlife Management Area. US 9756 is the park number. Anyway, so one of the things that I noticed is that these guys are getting out the park more frequently. Now, they may have been doing this just for fun and because the weather is nice or whatever, but I noticed them not only going out to the park, but doing it fairly frequent, and also while there, racking up a significant number of QSOs, which brought them into a position where, like I said, 300 to 400 QSOs ahead of me between the two of them, is getting the gap for me to close in on them was widening. And so I decided to do a thing. I got a little bit of a goal that happened, and I want to share with you the QSOs that I've made just in the past, let's say, week or so. So on August 20th, I'm going to share with you, I think these are my last 10 QSO or 10 activations. August 27th, 52 QSOs. The 28th, I stayed until UTC 000 and got a next day for 14. Once I got 14, I called it a day. So technically, I did 66 QSOs in that activation. I went out on August 31st and just simply logged 60 QSOs. And I did that during the daytime, so I did not stay until UTC 000. That was August 31st, 60 QSOs. Then September 2nd, I went out to the park probably right around 6 p.m., which is like probably about 5:30 actually, about 22:30. And I got 37 QSOs before UTC 0, and then I went ahead and logged 100 QSOs next day. So September 2nd and 3rd, total of 137 QSOs racked up. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that got me into second position. All right, I'm pretty sure that got me into second position. I'm not completely positive. It actually might have been when I went out again and did another activation that I did it. But anyway, September 4th, 123 QSOs. September 5th, let's see here, 89 QSOs. September 6th, 138 QSOs. So September 5th and 6th, by the way, that was all one operation. So let's do the math on that one here. I'm going to just pull up my calculator. This is the most QSOs I've ever done in a park. And let's see here. We're going to do, where was that at? 138 plus 89, 227 QSOs in one visit to the park. Or park. You get the idea. Parks on the air. Wildlife management area. Anyway, 227 QSOs. And that put me in first place on the leaderboard for Decker Wildlife Management Area with 10 above the second place position. So Mark Volstad, I've got first place. All right. And then just to kind of, make sure I get myself a little buffer there, I went out to the park again yesterday, September 7th, and before UTC 0000, I got 62 more QSOs in the log, and then I stayed until next day, and once I got to 14, confirmed that activation, I called it a day. So I got another 76 QSOs. So with that, I'm over here. I've got now 3,185 QSOs, and Mark Volstad, AI4BJ, he has 3,099. And that means that I am 86 QSOs ahead, which is pretty good. The thing is, though, I know he could easily go out and get 100 plus QSOs in a single activation. The one thing I have going for me is that he's currently out of town hiking, doing Parks on the Air with a friend. And the thing that I have going against me, he's going to see this. And I don't know that he cares, but he's probably going to see this. And he's also now retired. He just retired about 2 or 3 months ago. Maybe it's been 3 months already. But he's fully retired. He's into amateur radio like nobody's business. And he lives much closer to this park than I do. So we'll see. We'll see if he has if he's got a touch of competitiveness in him. Craig KC1NE. I noticed that I'm fairly certain that Craig is aware of my desire to take over the leaderboard for Decker Wildlife Management Area. I don't know that he cares. I'm not sure that he's into any of this for the competition. And one thing I do know is there's no way on earth that Craig isn't aware that I overtook his second place position earlier this past week. And on Sunday, I got a ham alert that he was activating. And of course, I looked it up to see if he was at Decker trying to, retake his position. And he was not at Decker. He was over at the Boone, what is that called? Gosh, why can't I think of it? Daniel Boone. What is the? Big Bone Park. So it's a Big Bone State Park down in whatever that part of Kentucky is. But it's just a little bit further down the road. He also has approximately the same number of QSOs in that park. So again, he's out there doing lots of parks on the air. He roams around quite a bit. I don't know that anybody. I really don't know of anybody who's as focused on these leaderboards, but I gotta tell you, it's just been fun. It doesn't mean anything really, and I want to share with you just how I felt like the day after. So I went and did that 227 QSOs, and I'm like, yes, I am in number one position, and I uploaded the logs. I confirmed that they were uploaded. I confirmed the number of QSOs that were accepted and all this other stuff. And I'm just refreshing the park page and waiting for it to update. And when I saw that first position for both activator and activator QSOs for the park leadership board, the leaderboard, I'm like, yes. And then I woke up the next day and I'm like, wow, okay, now what? because there was so much fun in the pursuit of that goal, and the pursuit of the goal was really the thrill. And now that I'm in that first position, there's a part of me that's hoping maybe that one of these two gentlemen will get serious about potentially getting a little competitive there. And there's a part of me that hopes, no, that doesn't happen, because I'd like to not sit there at Decker Wildlife Management Area every time I go out and play radio. I'd like to go explore some more parks and activate some new parks, and get back towards my goal of activating every park in the state of Kentucky, for example, and then move on to Indiana and Ohio and Tennessee. So there's still plenty of other things for me to do out there, but it was fun to set a goal. I was not sure I could pull it off in 1 week. It had been a long time since I worked some pileups, but I will say I have been working some pileups again lately. Now, there are some theories that I have about pileups. Number one, is there anything that is in my operation that has caused this to happen, or is it that band conditions are better? I think it's probably a mixture of both, and probably more leaned towards the bands opening up than operational situation. Now, I will say that a lot of my activations until the last 2 months or so had been pretty much reliant on my Yaesu FT891 and its ATOS antenna, which I think I shared in the previous episode, that there's an issue with my ATOS antenna setup on my car. I have what's called a swinging SWR. That's what I call it anyway. So I don't know what the official term is, but it will tune perfectly 1-to-1 or 1-to-5 tuned perfectly in the radio, and then I go to key up and the SWR stays right to where it was tuned for a second, and then as I'm continuing to talk, it then kind of just slips way up into like a SWR of 5-to-1, and occasionally it goes all the way up to infinity, and it just gives me this signal that says SWR is too high. and it won't transmit. So I was having that issue on a number of activations, and I was able to still make contacts, even though my SWR is swinging somewhere between, let's just say 1.7 to 3 to 5, occasionally bouncing up there. I was still able to make a few contacts, but the signal reports I was getting were terrible, and the number of people who could hear me, I just wasn't getting a lot. So eventually I kind of just gave up on my ATOS antenna for a while, and I just took it off the car and put the little plastic cap on my UHF, was that PL239 if it's the female, and the ATOS has just been put away. So when I decided to go out and start activating again at Decker, I started using my JPC-12, and I also started using my ICOM 7300. I did one act before I started setting up the JPC-12 again. I did do an activation just off of ham sticks, and ham sticks work pretty decently, I will say, but I still wasn't experiencing pileups. But then again, most of that operation was on 20 meters. And I don't know that I've ever worked significant pileups on 20 meters, but maybe I have. I could probably go back into some old logs and find out. I certainly have access to all of those logs. But something did happen recently, and that was I was using my JPC-12. I had my ICOM 7300, and I went down to 40 meters, so the 7 megahertz band. And I operated on 40 meters, and there's a lot less POTA activators that are typically self-spotted or spotted on 40 meters. I don't know why, but it just happens to be that most people are up there on 20 meters. So I went down, and all of a sudden, I'm working my first pileup in the longest time. And oh my gosh, was it amazing. It felt so good to work a pileup again. One of my favorite apps for Parks on the Air is called Portable Logger, POLO for short. So we call it the Polo app, and it's made by a developer called Ham2K, I think. But anyway, the Polo app, by far, in my opinion, the best Parks on the Air logging app on this planet. One of my favorite things is I actually have it on an iPad Pro, the 11-inch. I happen to have the Magic keyboard. And in the section where you enter in call signs, if you hear multiples, you can actually put a partial of a call sign and then put // and the next partial of a call sign and do // and then next partial of a call sign and do // and then another partial of a call sign. And by the way, when I say partial, any of those could even be full call signs. But if I hear multiple people spread out and I hear all of these, I just put // in between whatever I've got. Then what it does is this software automatically, you start working all the way from the right, from the very last one you started entering from the //. And so what's all the way to the right of the furthest right // in the box, you actually go and call for that person, get that full call sign and signal report. And of course, if they're park to park, you would enter in the park number. But as soon as that full call sign is in there and you got you just hit enter, and it only takes the full call sign to the furthest right // and it puts that into the log. And so now it removes that // at the end, and now you've got the next partial with all the other partials before it, with // in between. And so it's basically, I think they call this stacked logging. I don't know exactly what the feature is called, but man, this was amazing. So in my very first ever Parks on the Air, I was logging on paper. And so I was already doing this just naturally. I would just write down little bits and pieces of different call signs that I would heard, and I would call each of them. And wow, I'm like, I don't know that I could ever work a pileup as efficiently with software compared to this. But with this // it is absolutely amazing, just as good as paper logging, and in many ways better because if I've got a cell connection in the Polo app and my QRZ database subscription, I'm able to see and confirm who these people are, call them by name, all this other stuff. So yeah, I was working pileups again. Now, I happen to think that the fact that I'm camping out on 40 meters has a lot to do with it. I think 40 meter, especially most of the time when I'm operating at night. And I think 40 meters is somewhat better at night than 20 meters is, just by propagation overall. But also, I've also found that if I camp out as close to the top as of the band edge rather than the bottom of the band edge, and when I say top, I mean starting at the lowest frequency. So for me, that would be, 7.128 megahertz. And when I operate there, most people who are also using the Polo app or other apps, when they are actually when they actually have park spots or spots in the app listed, they may have it set by frequency, and this puts me at the top. And so as soon as somebody switches over and say, hey, I wonder if I can hunt some parks down in 40 meters. Well, if I'm listed right there at the top, then it's all good to go. Another thing that I notice is that as soon as I'm spotted there, within the first 3 minutes, I get a whole new round of QSOs. And if it's been 5 or 6 or 7 minutes since I've been spotted, I notice that it starts to slow down. The Polo app, along with a bunch of other apps, have the ability for you to spot yourself and to respot yourself. So I just hit respot once I've hit about 5 to 7 minutes. And as soon as I do that, again, another small little pileup and sometimes a rather large pileup will happen. And so there's some of me that wonders if I wouldn't have been able to continue to have good pileups if I had actually a decent antenna and I wasn't dealing with my ATOS. But I also know that the summer heat and all those solar flares, I heard a lot of other people complaining about band conditions and having challenges activating parks. And so I think it's a combination of all of the above. But I am thrilled with the cooler weather that we're experiencing here in the Greater Ohio Valley, I think is what they call it. And it's much welcomed, and the conditions are perfect for parks on the air. And I've just been crushing it. I love it. It's so much fun. All right, so the situation that I had that happened during the middle of a QSO. And also, this is the one where I'm literally fighting for first position. This is the night I had 227 contacts within one visit to the park. It was spread across 2 different days, but you get the idea. So that time, right around my 190th QSO, I get somebody that is a 5'9" from Alabama, and I call his call and tell him he's 5'9", and I don't hear anything back. And so I transmit again. I gave him his call and said 5'9" here in the park. I hear nothing back. And then I'm about ready to key again, and he calls me, solid 5'9" signal. He said, KQ4 UUR, are you still there? And I called back, yeah, this is KQ4 UUR. And then I said his call sign. I said, you're 5'9" in my park. And he's like, KQ4 UUR, are you still there? And I'm like transmitting. It's like, come on. And then I look over to my radio, and this is where it's really nice to make sure that you have a radio that actually shows your signal going out. And I was using the ICOM 7300, and so I could see that when I was pressing the push to talk button on my microphone and speaking into it, my voice was not showing a signal going out. Now, I was able to press one of the voice recordings and hit that, and I could see that was actually still sending out audio, but my microphone wasn't. So I started to wiggle the cable right underneath the microphone, and I noticed that sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't, sometimes it would. And people were saying, Cliff, I hear you, but you're broken up and all this other stuff. And at one point, just the push to talk button wouldn't work at all. And sometimes it kind of would work, and it was just really weird. And then it occurred to me, you know what? The ICOM actually has a transmit button. The ICOM 7300 has a little button that that says transmit. So if you press it, it opens up the transmission, and you have to press it again to turn it off. And so I pressed the transmission button, and now I've taken the PTT button on the mic out of the equation, and I noticed that if I wiggle the microphone back and forth, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's sending the audio, sometimes it's not. Obviously, it seems obvious to me that there is some sort of short that's happening in the cables inside the microphone between, the right with the stress relief part of the mic. And so one of the things that I was able to do is confirm that if I held the microphone by the cable dangling in the air in front of just dangling in the air in front of my mouth, and I just hold the microphone there, and then I press the transmit button, I could get it to where I twist my wrist a certain way that causes that to actually allow me to be heard full signal, full quality of the Heil microphone. It's a HM219, I believe, that comes stock with the ICOM 7300. And so I discovered that I could do this. So I want you to imagine, in my left hand, I'm holding the spiral corded cord of the microphone. The microphone is hanging, dangling down. I've got my wrist twisted to the left as much as I can to kind of keep this cable from shorting out. And the microphone is dangling in front of my mouth. And then I click the transmit button on the ICOM 7300, say KQ4UUR, calling CQ Parks on the air. I'm sorry about the delay here. I've had a technical difficulty with my cable and my microphone. I'm here at this park number. Just bear with me as I operate one-handed. And then I have to press the transmit button again to kill the transmission so I can receive. And then I get a whole pile up. And so I'm literally typing in partials / partial / partial / partial. And then I got that. And finally, people stopped calling. And then I, again, with my right hand, left hand is stuck. I have to hold this microphone, cannot move it. And then I press the transmit button and I said, okay, station ending with Bravo, come in. And then I have to hit the transmit button again. And then I got to get my right hand back over to the keyboard and type this in. But I also have to actually use the backspace or the arrow key to go to the beginning of the call sign and then hit enter. And then, oh my gosh, I did this for the next 40 minutes until I ended up getting all those, like I said, 227 QSOs, which I knew would put me 10 QSOs ahead of the first position. But holding that microphone in my left hand like that, operating one-handed, having to press the transmit button and then transmit button again to receive, oh, man, it was actually invigorating. It was fun. It was exciting, but it also was very exhausting. And to do it during a pileup, it was just something about the challenge of it that just woke up something fun and exciting inside of me. And so I enjoyed all of it. Wow, it was amazing. So the next morning, I woke up, drove out to R&L Electronics store, and I recognized that they had the HM219 stock mic from ICOM available for, I think it was like 46 something, so $47. On Amazon, it was $65, and it was about $65 on a bunch of other places, but they had it for 46 something. And I'm like, well, I'd rather have it the next day because, again, I might go out and do some more amateur radio. And actually, you know what? That was actually taking second place. That wasn't the time that I was doing it, because the next one is what gave me the 227 came as a result of another purchase I made. So I just totally messed up. That night was the one that allowed me to get into second place, not first place. But anyway, I digress. So I go up to R&L Electronics store. The first thing that I do is I bring my microphone into the store, and I said, hey, you've got an ICOM 7300 on display. Can I test something? And he's like, sure, absolutely. So I take his ICOM 7300 there in the store. I use its HM219 microphone, and I queue up and say, KQ4UUR, test. And it's perfectly fine. You can see the signal. And then I unscrewed the XLR jack and plug my microphone in, and I do the same thing. And sure enough, it's not transmitting. So this has confirmed that my microphone is the issue, and I purchased another microphone. And I immediately went out to my car, and once I made all of my purchases, because I purchased more equipment that day, as one does when you go for an hour-long drive to the amateur radio electronics store, right? So anyway, I went out, tested it on my ICOM. Everything's perfectly fine. It's working great. So I have my replacement. I put a label on my old microphone, and I just put, this mic is not working. And it is something that probably could be taken apart. I could probably rewire the whole microphone. Of course, the microphone itself is still amazing. And of course, the Heil microphone in the HM219 is awesome. It's an amazing microphone. So many people get so many awesome reports from it. So it's still a good microphone. It's just got to shorten the wiring, and it's somewhere between one of the mic wires and the PTT, and it's just shorted out inside of there. So yeah, I have no doubt that could be fixed, and who knows? It may be something of interest to me to fix it down the road. Anyway, while the night before going to R&L and doing some research, it occurred to me, what if I was to do hands-free operation? Now, I just proved to myself I could do one-handed operation, but I wonder what it would be like to do hands-free. And I've thought about getting a headset for quite some time. And I think if I really wanted to, I would have gotten the yellow Heil headsets, and I think they're a bit less expensive. And it's what I would have preferred to buy, just because, if anything happens to it, the cost of replacing it would be so much less. However, Heil is getting ready to release new versions of those headsets in October, and everybody's out of stock on the older ones. And so I went ahead and bought a Heil ProSound 6 IC, which is the ICOM version of this, and it's got the electric condenser element inside of it, which works with the ICOM. And the real bummer here is that microphone won't work with Yaesu, because Yaesu will only work with dynamic microphones. So this big ProSound 6 headset that I got will only work with my ICOM 7, ICOM radios and any other radio that has the power to the XLR to power that electric condenser microphone. Anyway, I went ahead and purchased that. I'm like, okay, well, most of the time when I'm going to operate in that way, I'm going to be operating on my ICOM 7300. As far as I'm concerned, it's my preferred field out parks on the air radio, unless I'm going hiking to some location that's really far from my car. But if it's right there next to the car, you better believe I'm going to use my ICOM 7300. So anyway, I went ahead and purchased the Heil ProSound version of the headset for the ICOM radio, and I also purchased the Heil PTT foot switch. And of course, you need the adapter to plug into the XLR so that you can actually plug your push to talk button or foot switch in my case, and your headset into the mic jack of the XLR input of the ICOM 7300. So I got the adapter for that, and even though I know that my Heil ProSound 6 IC will not work with my Yaesu 891, or at least I've been told it won't. I haven't tried and confirmed that it won't, but I have been told that it won't. But I went ahead and bought the accessory cable for the Yaesu 891, just in case I want to do headset operation with it. Now, my push-to-talk switch the foot switch from Heil will work with that. It's just that I would need a different headset. Supposedly, I need a headset with a dynamic microphone. However, I recently heard somebody say that they've used the KOSS, KOSS headset that's available for like $38 with their Yaesu 891. And if that is working, that has an electric, unless there's multiple versions of this KOSS headset. But anyway, I went ahead and purchased the accessory for hands-free operation because, boy, give me both hands on my keyboard and I'm just all hands on keyboard. I could work a pileup like nobody's business. And that's how I actually ended up being able to do that 227 thing. So it wasn't the 190th QSO, but it was right around the final 30 QSOs of when I took second place that I had the mic issue. But then the very next night I had my headset Pro Sound 6 hooked up to my ICOM with my foot pedal down there sitting in the front seat of my car, and that's how I easily logged 227 QSOs. And almost, I would say at least 70 or 80% of those were down on 7 megahertz, 40 meters. All right. Another thing that happened to me when I was pulling out my radio at night, in the dark, I accidentally had my foot stepped on one of the ground radials, and I pulled the antenna out of the ground, and of course the radials are all connected via a terminal ring, to the ground stake on the JPC-12. And by golly, I just ripped it right out of the ground, and I ripped the radio I was standing on out of the crimp of the ring terminal, which was a super easy fix. I just came home and I had another ring terminal that fits right over the whatever quarter 20, whatever that size of thing is for these JPC-12. A quarter inch 20. I don't know what it's called, but you know what it is. You know what I'm referring to probably. And so I already had another ring terminal that would work, and a crimper, and it even had heat shrink on it. So I went and took my wire cutters and snipped all of them off of the thing. And then I happened to love the fact that I purchased a very high-end wire crimper, that one of those ones where it just like, you don't have to size it, you don't have to do anything. You just put it in however long you want it and just squeeze, and boom, it magically pulls off this thing. It's just the most amazing thing. I think it's made by Klein or something like that. Anyway, I just stripped it back, wired them, squeezed them all together, threaded them all together, put them inside the little thing, crimped it down, confirmed it was super, super tight. I purchased a heat gun a long time ago, so I was able to heat shrink around it, and I was able to fix my radials in record time. That was a super easy fix. As far as my ATOS 120 antenna, I've talked with a number of people in my local amateur radio club, and a number of people have offered to help me. The first thing that I want to do is potentially meet up with somebody who has an ATOS antenna that's not doing what I have experienced with my swinging SWR, and just throw their antenna on my mount on the back of my car. And if mine is doing it and theirs is not, then that tells me that the issue I'm having is with my antenna. If it's my antenna, I was talking with Tom, KG8Y, Kilo Golf 8 Yankee, who happens to be local here in Burlington, Kentucky. He happens to have tons of experience with ATOS antennas. He's had multiple of them, and he's never purchased an ATOS 120 antenna. He's only purchased many different ones that were all broken, and he will Frankenstein his own together. So that's how familiar he is with the ATOS 120 antennas. And he suggested that if it is the antenna, it's likely corrosion on the bearings inside. And that would make a lot of sense given the fact this all started back in the winter, and there was lots of ice and snow and sleet and everything back then. And I kept my antenna on the car the entire time throughout all of that. And so that seems to be a very likely thing. And he said, Cliff, it's not too hard for you to go in and fix this. If you want to fix it, there's YouTube videos. If you can wait a couple of weeks, maybe I can find some time and you can come over and I can help you solve that issue if that's indeed what it is. So anyway, so that is likely a potential issue. If all of a sudden I have somebody else's ATOS that is known to be working and it does the same thing as my ATOS antenna, then we know it's not the ATOS. Then it would either be one of two things likely. I don't think it's the radio. I could obviously confirm that it's not the radio by simply hooking up my antenna during one of my operations that I know is working on the ICOM or my other Yaesu 891, and just put it on there and confirm that it's not the radio. But then more than likely it's either the coax between the lip mount and the radio has some issue, or it could be the actual bonding of the metal between the trunk lid and the car. So those are all possible things. Still haven't found a conclusion to that and a resolution, but it is forthcoming within the next several weeks, if not months. I have no doubt in my mind that before winter weather comes, it will be solved and I will be able to operate without getting out of the car if I happen to go on some more multi-park activations and want to use my ATOS antenna. And also, I would like to be able to do my ATOS antenna for me to just hunt some people down. Like I said, I like to support other people who are activating parks out there as well, especially those that I know personally. So, yeah, there's all of that. That's the update there. It'll eventually get worked out. And then finally, I will share with you some recent purchases that, since I was shopping around, all of a sudden I'm like, well, there's something I've been thinking about. So I did actually finally make I think it was 3 tiny purchases that finally allowed me to complete a backpack go bag for doing park activations or just operating amateur radio HF out in the field, even if it's not parks on the air related. And so I've been wanting to have everything I would need to do HF operations in a single backpack ever since I was first licensed. I've saw a lot of people talking about their go bags and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I'd like to have one of those. Now, for me, what was missing was a battery that would be small enough, but yet powerful enough that would last long enough. And then a coax feed line that would be light enough and small enough to fit into the bag and still get me far enough from the antenna so that I'm not technically a part of the antenna. And then also just the obvious connection from the battery terminals to Anderson power pole. So I actually ended up, I had been looking at a Bio-NO battery for the longest time. Either their 20 amp hour or I think they might have had a 25 amp hour. I'm not sure. But I just never could seem to pull the trigger on that. I have no idea why. But for whatever reason, I just never did pull the trigger on it. However, I did find this ERYY LiFePO 4 battery, lithium iron phosphate battery. And let me just go here to orders and I will tell you why I ended up purchasing this thing. It was only $68.47. $68.47, and it is a 25 amp hour battery. And it actually even says on there, it says it's actually rated for 25 amp hours, but you'll definitely be able to get 30 amp hours out of this, is what it says in the description. The other thing I love about this, it actually has an LCD display that lights up on the top of the battery that will show you both the percentage left in the battery, and it also shows you the voltage of the battery. So that is amazing. And I also like this one because it actually has terminals on it with screws rather than those little slide-on clip things. I don't know what those are called, but anyway, I wanted to be able to bolt this thing down and to know that that's got a nice secure connection there. And then I looked at the size of this thing and I'm like, I think that will fit in my backpack rather easily, and we'll give it a shot. And so let me see if I can find the specifications on how large this battery is. Does it show it here? Okay, here it is. It's 7 inches deep, 2.8 inches wide, and 6.8 inches high. So basically, it's not more than 7 inches in any direction, and it's less than 3 inches wide. And sure enough, I purchased this, got it delivered, and it fits. Oh, by the way, and I also purchased the ring terminals to Anderson power pole cable, so that's permanently installed on the battery. And this thing sits right in the front pocket of the backpack the hiking backpack that I have, and it zips up perfectly, like absolute dream come true, zips up perfectly. I was just blown away. The cool thing is that the battery the box that it was packed in came with this styrofoam that was formed to fit the bottom of this in the box and the top of this in the box. And I took what was the bottom portion of what was holding the battery in the place of the box without it jiggling around. I put that at the bottom of my backpack, giving the backpack even more kind of sturdy protection from whatever I'll put in there. And then I have my second Yaesu 891 radio with metal rails on them. I accidentally purchased rails off of Etsy, and they were 3D printed. I did not want that. So I ended up getting some metal rails. But anyway, I put my Yaesu 891 into the go bag, and sure enough, it fits right down in the same dimensions of where that battery was. So now my battery's got protection at the bottom, and then what was on the top of the battery, I can actually put on the top of the rails of the radio as well. So you're talking about very good protection of my radio inside of my backpack. Then my JPC 12 antenna in its carrying case also fits right inside of my backpack perfectly. And then now what I will tell you is I did make one more purchase, and that was a 25-foot run of coax made of RG316, which is really, really thin. I did a bunch of research on it. Turns out that I should have no problem at all running 100 watts through it on single sideband voice. And the fact that I have 25-foot run as my feed line for portable operations, there will be some signal loss. And so if I happen to be running 100 watts on my Yaesu 891, I think it said it might bring me down to where I'm effectively radiating about 80 some odd watts. So, it loses some efficiency. Some of the heat and power gets lost in that 25 run of that RG316 cable, but still plenty of watts going out. And so here's what's in my backpack. Again, I want you to think about this. This is nothing more than and this is not a large backpack. This is a small backpack. It's heavy because this battery, it's 25 amp hours. This isn't one of those 9 amp hour batteries. This is a 25 amp hour battery. So here's what my go bag, my backpack has. It has the 25 amp hour battery. It has my Yaesu 891 radio with its handheld microphone. It has a JPC 12 antenna in the antenna bag with its ground radials included inside of it. I also, inside that same antenna bag, I keep a 3-foot jumper coax, a 1-to-1 choke, and then the 25-foot of RG316 coax, and my Rig Expert Stick 500 antenna analyzer. All of that goes inside of the JPC-12 antenna carrying bag, and all of that can fit in my backpack right up next to my Yaesu 891. So then also when I go on operations, I will carry with me a handheld HT, which will go in one of the water carriers on my backpack, and that allow me to operate 2 meters and 70 centimeters from high up locations. Then I will almost certainly bring a a laminated band allocation chart, just to remind myself, just in case I forget where those band edges are on my 891. I will likely carry my iPad Pro for logging, but I will also carry a small notebook and pen for backup logging. I wrote this down. It's totally optional, but I could carry a Starlink Mini with me. And I'm not kidding, but it is optional. I do have Starlink Mini, and I do have an Anderson Power Pole multi-adapter, so it'll split out. And with a 25 amp hour LiFePO battery, that would be no problem at all to still operate for 4 to 6 hours and do 100 watts from the radio, all while having the Starlink Mini going. And I would still probably have, I would still only use maybe 50 or 60% of that battery. Anyway, now this is optional. This would not fit in the bag with everything else, but I could, if I ever needed to, I could bring a tuner with me. That would require me to carry something extra. I could probably carry some extra antennas in the bag, especially little dipoles or something like that. And I do think I want to end up getting one of these Gable GRA ULT01 Mach 3 or Mark 3, Make 3, whatever you call that, of the mini tripod. So it's a Gable tripod Mark 3. It is amazing looking, and I definitely would like to get one of those. And I've, of course, got all sorts of other things that I'd like to purchase out there. But now, one of the things that I did is yesterday I went out to the park, not because I needed more QSOs at Decker, but I literally wanted to operate 100 watts into the JPC-12 antenna using nothing more than what was in my backpack. And so no Starlink Mini, no tuner, no backup antennas, and I did not have a tripod. The only reason I'd like to have a tripod is because I'd like to be able to do operations in locations where I might not be able to put a stake in the ground. And there's this very specific activation I'm thinking of, and that is Natural Bridge State Park. And I'd like to operate off the top of a big, huge rock formation up there. So anyway, we'll see. It's gonna be a blast. But yeah, so I went out to the park and I operated off the battery that was in my backpack, the Yaesu 891 JPC-12 antenna. I did use the 3-foot jumper cable, put the choke in at the antenna side, and then I used the 25-foot cable of RG316 all the way to the car where my Yaesu was sitting, and I used my Rig Expert 500 to confirm my tuning of the JPC antenna, and operated multiple different bands, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And I operated for about 3 hours on that, and when the battery arrived, it was at 95%, and I left, it was 84%. So it is confirmed my Go bag is set up for portable operations. Super excited. That's what I had for you in this episode. I hope you enjoyed all of this rambling about my notes on amateur radio, the fun that I'm having. And, it just reminds me I think that if you really enjoy troubleshooting and challenges, you get a piece of equipment that goes bad, It can cause a little bit of a headache at times. And the good news is that I had other options available to me. If let's just say, for example, I was still wanting to hit a certain number of QSOs or whatever at a park and conditions are great, and my mic goes bad and I couldn't actually fix it with just holding the wire a certain way and using the transmit button on the front panel. I mean, I was operating from my car, and I could have put my JPC antenna onto my Yaesu 891 that's inside of the car. And I also have a Xiegu G90 if I need to do backup. And so there's other options, and I'm just having fun. That's it. Just having fun. This is my most recent update of Cliff's Notes on amateur radio. And until next time, I encourage you to enjoy this hobby to the hilt. And if you haven't got your license yet, go out and just, the technician is not hard at all. The general, quite frankly, is not hard at all. And I will tell you, there's just so much joy to be had in this hobby. If you are listening to this podcast and you've gotten licensed because you were inspired by this podcast, by all means, email me, let me know. I was reaching out to Tom, KG8Y, and I had to go to QRZ.com, log in so I could see his email address, and I noticed that on his QRZ, his email was, I think it's Tom at KG8Y.com. And I'm like, huh. And so, of course, I'm like, let me just pull up KG8Y.com. And there's nothing there. He doesn't have a website. But he did actually go ahead and purchase the domain just so people can email him there. So if I go to QRZ.com and type in KG8Y, and there it is. And then if his email is KG8Y at KG8Y.com. And I just like, that's pretty cool. So that's how I emailed him, to ask him about my ATOS antenna. And then that got me to thinking, it's like, why haven't I done that? So now you can email me, Cliff at KQ4UUR.com. Cliff at KQ4UUR.com. And the thing that's different here, go ahead and type in your web browser sometime, KQ4UUR.com, and see where that takes you, because it will take you somewhere. All right, until next time, or until I see you on the air, do I see you? Until I hear you on the air, follow me, or set a trigger, KQ4UUR, in your ham alert. Over at hamalert.org. Don't forget to request a new episode of the podcast and to mention this podcast if you make a QSO with me. It will probably motivate me and inspire me to get out here within the next few days and share some more of my notes on my experiences in amateur radio. And that's it. Don't forget to check out Ron, his new podcast, the 599 Signal Report podcast. Oh, and one last note. Congratulations to my friend Jack Prindle, AB4WS, 2025 Kentucky Amateur of the Year. And this is so deserving. Jack Prindle, AB4WS. For me personally, he has always been out there, gave me so much advice, lent me an ICOM 7300, which I'm so thrilled that he did, because I love my ICOM 7300. Boy, do I want one of those ICOM 7300 Mach 2s. That would be my station at home, and I would find a way to get a good antenna up in the air back here for that. Alrighty, I'm done. Jack Prindle, congratulations. Absolutely, you deserve it, my friend. 2025 Kentucky Amateur of the Year, AB4WS. All right, many blessings, KQ4UUR. I'm clear of this frequency, 7-3.